Teaching While Queer is a podcast for 2S LGBTQ plus educational professionals to share their stories in academia. Hi, I'm Brian Stanton, host of Teaching While Queer. We are a proud member of the Educational Podcast Network and can't wait for you to hear our stories from around the world of LGBTQ educators, administrators, and well, anyone who works in academia. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teaching While Queer. I am your host, Brian Stanton, and I'm so excited to have with me Fitz. Hey, Fitz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? What do you teach? How do you identify within the community?
Okay, yeah. So my name is Andrea Fitzgerald. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I taught for 7 years now. I'm a math coach. But I identify as a lesbian out here in these streets.
Some lesbians.
Yes, that's me. And my pronouns, I go she, her, hers.
Awesome. And so you are a math coach now, but you've had experience in the classroom?
Absolutely, yeah. I taught for, I think, 7 years in Memphis, and it was so cool because I taught at the same high school that I went to. So yes, it was one of my best moments. It's Yep.
That's awesome. You're not the first person to tell me that on this podcast, and I think that's so unique because, I live in a different state, so that ain't happening. But I think it's so fun to be able to go back and kind of get the other side of the experience.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. I think it's something I'm super proud of, and just to pour back into kids and where I came from, same neighborhood. It's just, I definitely loved it. It was a cool experience.
Absolutely. So then, what was it like for you growing up as a queer child?
So it was really awkward. I felt awkward. I felt out of place, and I didn't fit. I told my mom when I was second grade, it was this girl I liked, and I told her, and she was like, "I hope not." And I was like, "Oh, I guess this is not normal. I thought everybody liked girls. I mean, come
on." Yeah, what's not to like, right?
Right. But I just felt out of place. And then on top of that, we grew up in the church, and I think that made it even more challenging because Absolutely. It was like this, almost like this shame you're kind of taught, oh, you're not worthy, and some of those things. And I think I took on some of those narratives. And honestly, I think that's why I had the hardest times coming out, because of that in particular. I remember being in church and just being so sad when I was in college. I was just man, because I just, I like girls. And I knew that, but I tried to play the role. I tried to, date guys, and dated some really great guys. But yeah, it's just nah, not really. I wasn't into them like that. So it was definitely challenging for sure.
I have distinct memories of liking boys starting at age 4, and it's so funny to me that people are like, "Oh, they're just too young. You're too young. It's a phase or whatever it might be." And I'm just no, it's stuck. It's been around my whole life, kind of for straight people. I'm assuming for straight people that they know that they like the opposite sex.
Yeah,
pretty early on.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And it's why would you choose? And say, oh, it's a choice. No, it's really not a choice.
No.
To be ridiculed by people constantly. So, yeah.
Or especially growing up in the church, it's the choice is rejection from your community, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you follow through with who you know yourself to be, you run the risk of being rejected by your community.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So how do you think those experiences have informed your teaching and working with kids?
Well, I think that I'm going to be real. I ain't coming the door with empathy and compassion as a teacher. I'm going to be straight up about that. I was kind of biased in some ways. I came in 2-parent household, stuff like that. So I didn't understand, I guess, some of the dynamics as a teacher. Not necessarily judging against of queer students, but definitely like just some like I was a black teacher biased against black kids, and I definitely more stuff where I came better at that. But I think as far as like queer students, I think that it I think it made me want to be more authentic, because I realized like I remember just seeing like small windows of gay people growing up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes!" Like I remember Pedro on The Real World. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
Pedro on The Real. I was like, "Oh my gosh!"
Man.
Right? I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And then like you see like lesbians and stuff like that on TV, you like, "Oh my gosh!" Like, are you serious? So I think it was really important for me to be authentic. Like I think right before I became a teacher, I used to still try to wear like feminine clothing, so that I could present like that's really who I was. But as a teacher, I had just like said, listen, this I'm doing it all day, every day. Like out of work, I wore clothes like this, but at work, I would wear something different, and it wasn't authentic. So I think it was really important for people to see someone that they could relate to, and someone that looks like who they are. I think that's really important, especially being like masculine presenting. I think that was really important.
Do you consider yourself more of a butch lesbian, or is that not in your like wheelhouse of labels? I know there are lots of labels out there for our community
Right.
that I do not subscribe with, but like,
Right.
how do you sit with that?
So I mean I would say I am, and it's so crazy, like in the black community, gosh, we have labels for days. You got studs, you got stems, you got femmes, you got, gosh, you could go on and on. And studs like more masculine presenting. I think that I would, if I had to label myself as something, if I had to, I dress like this, but really inside, I'm kind of sensitive. I'm kind of sensitive, and I really had to do a lot of work around that, because the previous relationship I was in, let me not even put it on her, but she had said that she dated a man after me, and I internalized that as I needed to be more masculine.
Mm-hmm.
So in my next relationship, I was trying to be somebody that I wasn't. I was like, listen, that ain't me though. Like I'm sensitive, things hurt my feelings. I'm not about to sit here and pretend like I'm hardcore out here, because that ain't me. Like it's not me. So I'm actually in therapy right now with that thing. You know what I'm saying? So,
we love therapy.
Yes.
And who is not in therapy right now?
Right. Listen, I say I'm crazy as hell. I gotta have somebody to talk to.
Absolutely. Or someone, like, the way I try to explain it to my own children who are like anti-therapy is it's like you have this cheerleader who is always there to like help your life be better. Like that's what this person's for.
Yes.
And it's
absolutely.
like they're not there to like change you drastically. They're here to like cheer you on so that you can get what you want out of life. It doesn't work for teenagers. It did not work on selling them on it, but here we are. So have you had the opportunity to work with queer students? I know that you worked in schools. Now you're a math coach. So actually, before we dive into working with queer students, tell us a little bit about what you do as a math coach.
So as a math coach, basically, I help not new teachers. That's like my own business and my own personal business. I work with new teachers. Like I wrote a book for new teachers. Bam, bam, bam.
Hey, look at that.
Yes. Yeah, so I wrote a book for new teachers. So that's what I do in my business. Like I support and help new teachers not quit, because y'all, my first year was a whole disaster out here. But as a math coach, what I do is basically just support not new teachers, but support teachers and leaders around like the Common Core standards. The new math. That's what I do. Help the people with the new math. Be like, get rid of the Common Core. Yeah, that's what I do. Yes, that's what I do.
As a parent, I was like, you're just gonna have to get help in school. I was like, I don't got it. I'm sorry. I can tell you how to get the answer, but it's not the right way.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. You say the visual models, and you take the 10, and you read. Yeah, so that yeah.
Awesome. So then, during your time as a teacher, did you have the opportunity to work with queer students, or students who may have been discovering that, because you did work with a younger group of kids, correct?
I work with high schoolers.
Oh, you did work with high schoolers.
I work with high schoolers, so they was just unapologetic.
They really are.
Yes, they were just themselves. Now, this is what I thought was cool and was very different. You know, like when I grew up, it was like, okay, when you go to college, you do your thing and you come back, it's like, oh, by the way, yeah, I like girls. You know, but now, like the people in high school, they like, yeah, this is my girlfriend. Like they walking in hallways, holding hands and stuff like that. And I mean, it was crazy. You know, I had students that want to talk to me about their little relationship. I'm like, okay, well, I can, you know, give you a little advice or whatever. And some of my players, when I coach, they still call me. They still call me and they'll ask me here and there about this what's happening, man. What should I do and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, definitely I had the opportunity to work with them for sure.
I love that. And did you ever have to deal with any kind of anti-queer behavior while teaching?
I don't think so. I had a really supportive principal, just in administration. Like they just kind of let us do what we needed to do, and I think it helped too that we produced results. So they weren't really. Yeah, I don't know. It definitely was different, I think, in this high school, as far as like people just being unapologetically who they are. It was a lot of freedom, very different from how I grew up when I was in high school. Like you went out, you kept that to yourself, and people they just did what they did, walk holding hands. It's like no big deal. And I think they even had a student. They allow she was a transgender student. They just allow her to wear whatever, you know. It's like no big deal, right? So and definitely even like supported that student. Like you wouldn't allow people to bully and stuff like that. So it was definitely a progressive place in my opinion.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really affirming environment. Were there specific things that you can think of that they did, like you intentionally know that they were doing these things to help students kind of be themselves?
Well, I think it started, I mean, I think it started with the staff, the people that they hired. I mean, like I can definitely think about different people in the building with like different skill sets. And, you know, I don't know if you read this book, Good to Great. He says you got to have the right people on the bus. And I think that's what made that school the way that it was. Like it was like in every classroom, it was a solid teacher, and it was people who really were invested in kids' success, and they were okay with them being different. You know, like they didn't judge them for being different. So I think that was to me one of the most pivotal things, because it didn't like. It seemed to me that they were very intentional about who they brought in that building. And that I think makes a huge difference. Just like with anything type of culture you're trying to build, you got to have the right people on the bus for sure.
Absolutely. I think it's so funny because so many teacher education programs, they use like business books to help teachers with the relationship part of our job. So, you know, reading like Good to Great or the school districts that I've worked for have done like a lot of Brene Brown, working through shame and empathy, and how do you have uncomfortable and vulnerable conversations and all this stuff. And it's just like these skill sets that teachers have like are really just across the board. It's so funny because when people are like, I'm thinking about getting out of teaching, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, look at all the things that we do. All you need is someone to help you market that in a different way.
Right.
I mean, like classroom management is, you know, operational organization. And doing these book studies on things like Good to Great is literally leadership management skills. So it's so interesting just how it's almost like the professional development we get is training us for like a whole other industry.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm like, that's not going to work in the classroom.
Yeah, I think a lot of times that people focus on tactics, but it's like it's like the other things you really need to do the job. Like that's literally what inspired me to write that book. It was like, yeah, that's great. Okay, you wrote me a lesson plan. All right. but what is it I really need to do this job? Like you were saying, like as a teacher, you are a master manager. You, like you said, classroom management, you do your teaching, you're watching the kids, you're being a therapist, you're being a coach, you're being a parent. I mean, you have so many different roles, and it's just, you know, you need a lot more than what you get, what you get in your teacher education program, for sure.
Absolutely. And so let's talk a little bit about your book. Let's do a little shameless plug for our folks who are not watching. You held it up earlier, so tell us, what's the name of your book? What can people find in your book?
Yeah, so the title of my book, it's the Rookie's Playbook for New Teachers. So basically, you know, just kind of like what you were talking about, like I did not feel prepared to be a teacher. And that it bothered me, you know, like it was just like, man, I wish somebody would have just made this real simple for me. So that's really what I hope to do, just practical things for new teachers, because I think, like, going back to what you just said earlier, like if I'm a new teacher, good to great, it's not gonna help me right now. Like I need to know what I could survive yesterday. So that's really the whole purpose of me, because essentially, like, even though I work in education, to me it's about building the confidence and self-efficacy of people. And I just, you know, I really just want people to believe in themselves, you know.
Absolutely.
So it's really important. And
I think that's so helpful too, because a lot of the times we, like, as teachers, we get graded once a year. You know, we have our evaluations and whatnot. And I was always told, like, just know that you are going to be, like, at the center of this rubric. Like, you're going to be in the middle. Like, that's the goal. Your first year teaching, and maybe your first 5 years teaching. And I'm like, okay, so then why, if I am, like, middle ground, why are you training me from good to great when I'm not good yet? Like, I'm still brand new.
Right.
So I love what you're doing, and that you're giving practical kind of advice on how to handle those first couple of years teaching, because especially that first one can be incredibly difficult.
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Yes.
Awesome.
Definitely gave me a run for my money, for sure.
For sure. And if you don't have a group, also, if you don't have your people on campus, then not only is it difficult, it's incredibly lonely.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. And I think, you know, just thinking even about like I'm thinking about this podcast in general, like especially like kids in class, like shoot, you know, you kind of need your people too, with support. Like just like as a new teacher, we need support. I mean, I'm imagining students do too, right? Like, I mean, I would have been so valuable to see someone that looked like me when I was a student. So it's just, you know, we need people out here in these streets. We do.
Absolutely. Representation is so important. And so it's so exciting to see, just like in doing this podcast, the variety of people that are out in front of students every single day.
Yeah, it is. And you know, I mean, clearly you can tell looking right here. Listen, ain't no secret what's going on up in here. You know what I mean? so yeah.
And then, so if you've got this book that's giving advice to new students, or rather to new teachers in their first couple of years, what advice would you give to a new queer teacher who's coming into the community and or into the classroom, and maybe they're not sure if it's okay to be themselves? Yeah. What kind of advice would you give for them?
Oh, I love that's such a great question. That, I mean, I just love that question, because I literally made the decision to dress how I was going to dress, right, like literally the summer before I started. And I would say to any new teacher that is in a profession, I would say be unapologetically yourself. That's exactly what I would say, because especially when you think about the one part of it is, I mean, obviously, I think kids connect more to someone who's genuine. And the research behind that says so. It says that kids won't learn if they don't feel safe. Well, how do you make them feel safe? You be genuine, you be authentic. But the other part is it just feels better to be yourself. Like, you ever been in a relationship with somebody and you don't feel like you can be yourself? it is the worst thing in the world. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, can this just be over already? Because you don't ever adjust. It's like a bad outfit or something. And so I would say to any new teacher, man, be yourself. And I think the beauty in being yourself is like, you are going to help so many people by you just being you. Like, I imagine it was students that they didn't have anyone else to have that conversation with, but they like, okay, Miss Fitzgerald, I know I can talk to her. I see her and her girlfriend in my basketball game. Okay, I can just let her know what's going on, because like, you create a safe space. Like, we naturally gravitate towards people who are more like us. So, man, please be yourself. Like, do not hide who you are. Bring all of that sauce to the role.
I love that, all that sauce. Mm-hmm. I have a friend who teaches an acting class in Chicago, and he calls that like your stank. And he the image that he has for it is Looney Tunes, like Pepe Le Pew, the skunk, and he's got like his smell wafting after him. And he's like, yes. That's your stink, and it's all who you are.
Yes, I love it.
I love that too. So I lost my train of thought. What do you think that schools can do better to make school more inclusive for LGBTQ students?
I think, you know how you had like a math club and stuff like that? Like, I think it would be cool to have a space like that for LGBTQIA plus students. Mm-hmm. I think just knowing that it's people in the building that you can relate to in safe spaces, like, man, it would have been invaluable for me, just knowing it's other people that potentially are, you know, having the same experience. Like, and I think also empathy. I mean, I think that educators and we need to be trained on this stuff, because some of the things that we can say are not, like, it's not inclusive and it's biased as hell. I mean, I can remember being at a job, like, I'm gay as they come, and the people were like, they were reading this article about Cheryl Swoops, and I think she was dating a woman or something. They were like, ew, you know? I mean, imagine I'm not out, how that would feel. So I think, I mean, not just diversity training, but like, they really need to understand like the experience of people who are different. Like, this is the last two jobs I've had have been the first places where it's very inclusive. And it's because what are your pronouns? What, you know, like, it's very inclusive. Like, oh yeah, my wife, this. I mean, it's no problem. Like, no one cares who you date. Like, they don't care. But I think that'd be very, I think, very helpful. Like, having a safe space, a club or something, you know, like, to talk to the people and just like the training, but not just the training, like, it should be in our values and how we show up and how we do things. So I think that would really help schools for sure.
Absolutely. And I'm a huge value-centered person, so I think that that's right on point. Like, the schools do a really great job of being like, here's our core values. And like, my daughter can recite them and do a little dance for each, you know, core value. But it's that next step of like, how do you live that core value? How do you show up with that core value every day? That I think that we lack a little bit on, especially right now. It's getting so fraught with Republican pushback or conservative pushback about like the idea that like, we shouldn't be teaching kids to be people. Kind of like, there's some things that need to be taught at home, but at the same time, like, we always knew that education was a community job. We've always known that kids will learn some things at school, kids will learn some things at home, and that everybody involved is helping to shape that child. So it's really interesting to me when people are like, I don't know if you should be talking about core values, because my core values at home are different than, you know, this core value. And I'm like, okay, well, the core values at this school are honesty and integrity. Like, what is wrong with those core values? What are we concerned about?
Yeah. It's almost like I hear you saying, like, are we really living these out?
Yeah, absolutely. Are we? And are we teaching kids how to do it?
Absolutely, because it's one thing to say something, but it's another thing to actually do it and live it. That's a little bit different. It's
Mhm.
more intentional for sure.
Absolutely. I think about a few years ago, there was a lot of pushback on the Instagram teachers and their
Hmm.
wildness that always happens right around this time in August and June, the late July, um, where they start posting their beginning of the year stuff and what they're planning on doing, and like family tree projects became a hot topic for a couple of years. And for me, because I have adopted kids, it was like a really big issue because
Mm.
I had a child who was like break down in tears because they were given
Mm.
a family tree project, and it was like brings
Wow.
up questions that they didn't realize that they had because they weren't really thinking about it until it
Mm.
got kind of put in their face. And so it's interesting how what you're talking about is to just be like culturally aware of
Mm.
the kids in your classroom space
Yes.
and make
Yes.
sure that they are not only represented in the classroom but like seen, heard.
Yes. 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 And it's so interesting. And I think we have, as a culture, and maybe it's not as a culture, but I know in the Black community, it's like, girl, shut up and get in that corner and shut up. But it's like seeing kids for who they are and them bringing themselves to the space and us being okay with it, because a lot of times we can reject kids for who they are because we don't feel comfortable as an adult. And man, how terrible is that? Just because I'm uncomfortable with you being yourself, I'm gonna squash you. Like that's disappointing to me.
It really is. And there's so many people that I've known, so many teachers where it's like, well, I'm not using those pronouns. And I'm like, okay,
Mm,
well,
yeah.
you won't have a relationship with that child. We'll see how long that they stay in your class or whether or not they're able to
Right.
succeed because they have no support from you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's so disheartening.
It is. It is. It is. And it's like, and you don't have to understand it to agree with it. I feel
No,
like,
absolutely. And it's
yeah.
not even necessarily agree with it so much as
Mm,
accept.
yes.
Like, there has to be a
Love
point
that.
when people just accept that what I'm telling you about myself is real.
Mm,
Because it's me and myself, and I know myself better than anybody else is going to know myself. And you know yourself better than anybody else is going to know you. So
absolutely.
it just seems so hypocritical to be like, I know myself and this is my limit, but you, I don't agree with who you think you are. You obviously
Right.
you're wrong.
Yeah. 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 Oh, you dropped some gems on that. You dropped some bars, Brian. You dropped some bars on that.
I
That
love
was
it.
deep right there. That was real. I love that. Absolutely love
Yeah.
that.
Well, before we wrap everything up, is there anything that you would like the opportunity to ask me?
Yeah, B. Look, I done gave you a nickname and everything. You B now. All right.
I'm in. I love it.
Yeah. So you say you have some little ones. That's so cool.
I
That's
do. They're not so little anymore, but yes.
okay. So what was your first year like as a teacher?
My first year as a teacher was pretty intense. So I teach theater, and so it can be very busy because you've got like in class work that you're doing, but then you also have the after school element of it.
Okay.
And my first year teaching, I was teaching by myself. My classroom was a black box theater. So for those who don't know, a black box theater is literally a room painted black.
Okay.
Where you can kind of maneuver furniture and whatnot so that you can set up any style of stage in that space.
Okay.
Um, and the way that the previous director had like placed the lights were shining from above. There's a walkway, so that way we can adjust the lighting and whatnot and use it as a
Okay.
performance space. The lights were shining through the bars and the rails of that walkway, so literally I felt like I was in prison because
Okay. Okay.
on the walls and on the floor were these shadows of bars. And so I had a really big struggle my first year teaching because like just the environment of the space itself before I realized, oh, I can move things. I can
Mm,
make this space my own.
right.
And then I did, and I put colorful lights on the walls, and all of a sudden it was like, oh, rainbows and sunshine. I'm happy. Um, But for a long time, I called it the Bat Cave because I just felt like I was in this dark cave. I was constantly working. I never stopped. I was always working during my lunch.
Wow.
And it wasn't until about 3/4 of the way through the year that my best friend now, who was working across the hall from me, was like, you need to get out of your classroom. You're going to come here during lunch and you're going to hang out with me. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like, when you don't have rehearsal, you're going to go home and
Right.
be with your kids and all that, because I got so swept up in perceived expectation.
That part.
Yeah.
That part.
Where it may not have been real what I was thinking I needed to do. It was just what my brain told me. If I wanted to be a good teacher, I have to do all these things. And I could equate that to like people who are looking at Instagram going like, look at those perfect, beautiful classrooms that have, you know, wood grain on the wall and they built a tree in the middle of the room and all this stuff. And like my classroom's over here with like white walls and a billboard.
Right.
And that's great. That's fine. It's just like you get this in your brain, like if I'm going to be a good teacher, I have to do X, Y, and Z. But really, you have to do like X.
Yes, that's so good. That's so good. I think in general, like social media gets you every time, man. It have you convinced that you're supposed to do something. Yeah, those perceived perceptions are real. Oh, I got a follow-up question, B.
Oh, go for it.
Okay, I got questions. Okay, so what is it like for you, like teaching while queer?
So it's been an interesting ride for me because I have 4 kids, and because at the time when I started teaching, one of my kids was at the high school I was teaching at. The other 2 were in the middle school. The youngest one was in the kindergarten. So like they were present in my life, and so I was outed when I was young. For those of you who don't know, go listen back to the welcome episode on season 1, and I explained my whole outing story. But I was outed when I was young, and so I've had a long time to be comfortable with myself. When I moved to Texas, I had the opportunity to become a teacher, and I did. And so from the get-go, I was gonna be myself because there was no hiding it. When literally my son walks from his class to my classroom, I'm not going to tell him he's not allowed to talk about his dads. I'm not going to tell him he needs to lie. So I was just myself. In my first year teaching, at least, I had one student who used my being queer as an excuse to drop the class after the deadline, citing how I was discriminatory against straight white boys. And I was like, no. And my principal said, you know, maybe you shouldn't be out so quickly with your students here in this community. And I was like, well, that's not going to happen because, like, I have a family here. And subconsciously, I realized after the fact that I had, like, the following year and the year after, I had removed my family from, like, my About Me presentation that you give at the beginning of the year. And it wasn't until I went through it a few years after that I was like, I really took that feedback to heart and like absent-mindedly went back into a little closet when I didn't need to. I mean, I still had like a rainbow flag in my classroom and all this stuff, but for some reason I just stopped talking about my family with the exception of talking about my kids because some of the students knew who my kids were and whatnot. And so it was really interesting. Now I feel like the biggest struggle that I have is not taking on the banner of being the gay teacher, in the sense that, like, when I left my previous district, I was emailed by people and called by people and told, like, my kids who are in middle school, like, they feel safe on their campus because you are out in yourself at the high school campus. Like, you're making it okay for the community. And I'm just like, that's a lot of responsibility for one person. And so that's one thing that I had to keep in check for myself, is that I had to remember that, like, above all else, my family and myself have to come first. And then I can be that light for the community, but I don't necessarily have to take all the responsibility on myself to like make everything perfect and better for everyone else.
Yeah, that seems like that would be heavy, you know. Seems like that's heavy to carry. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, and in the community that I was teaching in, I mean, I feel like all of us who were some sort of minority felt like at one time or another we were the banner carrier for our minority. A friend who is Black, and he was like the social justice teacher. He took care of the social justice club and all this stuff. I have a friend who was Mexican, and she was like we each represented almost our minorities because the group or the school that we were working in was majority white students, and perceived cisgender heterosexual. So we each kind of had to carry some sort of banner in a way. And I think that we just need to remind ourselves that it's okay to take the banner up, but you're also allowed to put the banner down when you need to. Because if you aren't filling your glass and if you're not making yourself okay, then you can't be there for everybody else, and you can't take on any extra responsibility of like, I'm here to save all the queer kids for the school. You're not. You're here to show them that there's a possibility for their future. And the way you do that is just by being yourself.
That part, that's the sauce. The stank, as we say. Okay, that's it. Love that.
I love it. Well, Fitz, I've had a great time talking with you. I appreciate that you came with me on this journey on the episode. So thank you so much, and I hope that everybody at home or wherever you're listening enjoyed this episode of Teaching While Queer. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Teaching While Queer. Teaching While Queer is a member of the Educational Podcast Network. I hope that you listen wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great day, and don't forget to review us. Bye!